The hum of the clippers was the metronome of my life, a steady buzzing rhythm against the soundtrack of the neighborhood. For 2 decades, Q's Cuts had been more than a business. It was the heart of the block, a sanctuary of steam towels, sharp razors, and sharper talk. The air, thick with the scent of barbicide, bay rum, and the sweet dusty smell of cut hair, carried the stories of the city. Men came in for a fade and left with their burdens a little lighter, their confidence restored by a crisp lineup. My chair, the big leather cocan in the back by the window, was my throne. From there, I held court. But the king had only one subject that truly mattered, one heir to the kingdom of my pride. You see that spin move last night? The way he left that defender looking for his ankles? I'd say, my voice booming over the buzz of my Andes, not even breaking concentration from the precision work of an edge up on old Mr. Henderson. That's old school. I taught him that. Right out back in the alley, with a cracked milk crate nailed to the garage and the concrete all busted up. Gotta learn to handle the ball on a bad surface. Builds character. Makes the polished wood of a real court feel like glass. A chorus of agreement would rise from the worn-out vinyl waiting chairs. Dre, a young buck who practically grew up in the shop, sweeping up hair for a couple of bucks after school, would shake his head in admiration. That boy's got ice in his veins, Q. Pure ice. He don't feel pressure. I seen him at the line, down by 2 seconds on the clock, and he just smiles at the other team, then sinks them both. Swish, swish, nothing but net. It's a beautiful thing. He moves just like you used to, man. Another voice, Sal the cop on his day off, would add, flipping through a wrinkled sports magazine. Saw you play back at North High. Same long stride. Same way you'd hang in the air for just a second longer than physics should allow. Before the knee, man. Before the knee, you were going to be something else. I'd puff out my chest, the pride of physical warmth spreading through my veins, more potent than any liquor. I'd catch my reflection in the mirror, a man whose dreams of playing pro had been cut short by a blown-out knee on a rainy college court, and I'd see redemption. It wasn't just a physical reflection. It was a spiritual one. The ghost of the player I could have been had been exorcised by the living reality of my son. That's my blood, I'd declare, my voice dropping with reverence, the Clippers pausing for a moment of silent tribute. That's a Williams. We don't bend. We don't break. We fly. And on the wall, above the vintage boxing posters of Ali and Frazier, and the faded team photo of my own short-lived college ball career, was the shrine, the testament, the wall of Q Jr. It was a living collage of newspaper clippings, the headlines screaming his name, Williams Jeter. Leads north to victory, a legend in the making, the heir to the city's crown. Glossy 810s of him soaring toward the rim, his face a mask of fierce concentration, his body a study in athletic poetry. There were other things, too, things only I truly understood the value of. His first pair of tiny sneakers, bronzed and mounted on a plaque, a T-ball trophy from when he was 6, his smile missing 2 front teeth, a framed report card from middle school, all A's, a testament to the discipline I'd instilled in him off the court. In every photo, in every memento, I saw myself. The same long limbs that I cursed after my injury, now repurposed for glory. The same determined set of his jaw, a mirror of my own stubbornness. The same fire in his eyes. He was my legacy, my masterpiece, the living, breathing proof that Quentin Williams Sr. had made something good and true in this world. Tasha, my wife, would sometimes bring lunch by the shop, her presence a soft counterpoint to the rough masculine energy of the place. She'd bring me a Tupperware of her chicken and rice, her smile a patient, knowing thing that I always found beautiful, but her smile never quite reached her eyes when the topic turned to bloodlines, to genetics, to the unbreakable chain of ancestry. when I'd point to a picture of Lil Q dunking and say, "Look at that, Tasha. He's got my grandfather's hands, big and strong, able to palm a basketball since he was 12. She'd just nod, her fingers tightening on her purse strap. "He's a special boy, Q," she'd murmur, her voice soft, and she'd quickly change the subject. "Did you remember to call the plumber about the sink? The parent-teacher conference is next Tuesday, don't forget." I saw it, her subtle diversions, her flicker of discomfort, but I didn't understand it. I was a man who saw the world in straight lines, in cause and effect. I chalked it up to a mother's humility, a quiet aversion to the loud, boisterous pride of men. I thought it was her way of keeping us grounded, of warding off the evil eye with modesty. I was a fool, a proud, blind fool. The morning of the championship game, the tension in our small apartment was thick enough to cut with a knife. I was pacing the kitchen, too amped up to eat, rewatching highlights from the semifinals on my phone. "Look at this crossover, Tasha. He faked the defender so bad the poor kid's still looking for his jockstrap in the bleachers. That's Williams' DNA right there. That's pure instinct." Tasha was at the counter, her hands trembling so badly she spilled coffee, the dark liquid splashing across the white formica. She let out a small, sharp gasp and began frantically wiping at it with a paper towel. "Whoa, take it easy, baby," I said, laughing. "It's just a game. He's got this." She didn't look at me. "I know," she whispered to the counter. I have a bad feeling." I put my hands on her shoulders, turning her to face me. "Bad feeling? Tasha, this is the best day of our lives. This is the culmination of everything. All his work, all our sacrifice. Tonight, the whole city sees what I've known all along. They see greatness." I kissed her forehead. It was cold and damp. I figured it was just nerves. Lil Q wasn't just a good player. He was a phenomenon, a local legend in the making. At 17, he was the city's hope, the kid from the block who was going to make it big. Scouts from Division I schools, Duke, Kentucky, UNC, were permanent fixtures in the peeling wooden bleachers of his high school gym. The scholarship wasn't a possibility. It was a foregone conclusion. It was our ticket out of this neighborhood, his ticket up to a world I could only dream of. All he had to do was what he did best: win. Tonight was the city championship, North High versus the West Side Vikings, a rivalry as old as the city itself. The night of the game, the air in the arena was electric, a tangible thing you could taste on your tongue, metallic with anticipation. The roar of the crowd was a physical force, vibrating up through the soles of my shoes and into my chest. I sat in the front row with Tasha, my hands gripping my knees so tight my knuckles were white, my heart pounding in time with the high school drumline's frantic rhythm. Every time Lil Q touched the ball, a current went through me. He was magnificent, a conductor orchestrating a symphony of movement on the court, a blur of grace and power. He was playing against a backdrop of pure hostility. The Vikings were a bigger, more physical team, and their fans were loud and ugly. But Lil Q was unfazed. He'd snatch a rebound over two of their lumbering forwards, and in one fluid motion, launch a full-court pass for an easy layup. Steals, no-look assists, draining threes from so deep it was an act of pure disrespect to the other team. He was playing on another level. A man among boys. I was on my feet, roaring his name until my throat was raw. "That's my boy! That's my blood!" I screamed, turning to Tasha to share the moment, to see my own ecstatic pride reflected in her face. But she was pale, her hands clenched into fists in her lap, her knuckles white. Her eyes were wide with an anxiety that seemed to go beyond the tension of a close game. She wasn't watching the scoreboard. She was watching him, her son, with a strange, consuming terror, as if she was expecting something awful to happen with every step he took. I frowned. a flicker of irritation cutting through my joy. Relax, baby, I said, patting her knee. He's got this. He was born for this. She just gave a tight, jerky nod, her eyes never leaving the court, her jaw clenched so tight I could see the muscles twitching in her cheek. It was the final minute. We were down by 1. The opposing team had the ball, trying to run out the clock. Their point guard, a cocky kid with a loud mouth, was dribbling near mid-court, showboating, trying to draw a foul. He got sloppy. A lazy dribble. Lil Q saw it before anyone else. He was a predator sensing weakness. A flash of white and gold. His arm shot out. A serpent strike, and he tipped the ball loose. He snatched it, and he was gone. The entire arena held its breath as one. The roar died, replaced by a collective silent gasp. It was just him and 100 feet of polished wood. Just him and the basket. He streaked down the court, his long legs eating up the distance. He took off from just inside the free throw line, a perfect poetic ascent. He was flying. He was a Williams. And then he wasn't. Midair, at the apex of his flight, something went terribly wrong. His body just quit. His limbs went slack, like a marionette whose strings had been cut. The ball slipped from his grasp, bouncing harmlessly away toward the baseline. His face, a moment before a mask of fierce determination, went slack with a look of utter blank surprise. He crashed to the polished wood with a sickening final thud that echoed in the sudden, horrified silence of 10,000 people. It wasn't a sound of impact. It was a sound of finality, like a heavy bag of wet cement hitting the floor. The world went into slow motion. The screaming started a moment later, a collective gasp of disbelief turning into a wall of panicked noise. But it all sounded like it was coming from underwater. I vaulted the railing, my bad knee screaming in protest, a shot of white-hot agony that I barely registered. I didn't feel it. My legs were pumping before my brain had even processed what my eyes were seeing. I was the first one to him. His eyes were rolled back in his head, a thin line of foam on his lips. His skin was clammy and turning a terrifying shade of gray. Q, Lil Q, son, wake up. I shook him, my voice a ragged plea I didn't recognize as my own. Paramedics swarmed around us, their faces grim, pushing me back. Sir, please, give us room. We need space to work. Tasha was beside me then, her wails a thin, sharp sound in the cavernous, suddenly sacred space around our fallen boy. I saw his teammates, kids of 17 and 18, weeping openly, holding on to each other. I saw the opposing team, their hostility forgotten, kneeling in a silent prayer on their side of the court. The world had stopped. The drive to the hospital was a blur of wailing sirens and Tasha's choked sobs. I sat in the front seat of the ambulance, my hand gripping my son's limp one through the forest of tubes and wires the paramedics had attached to him. The waiting room at University Hospital was a sterile beige purgatory, smelling of bleach and fear. Time ceased to exist, stretching and compressing in unbearable ways. Every swing of the double doors from the ER made my heart seize, my stomach clench. Hours crawled by. Teammates, their young faces etched with a grief they were too young to understand, came and went in a somber procession. Coaches, their usual bluster replaced by hushed, solemn tones, offered useless words of support. He's a fighter, Q. He'll pull through. Friends from the shop, from the block, they all came. A silent, worried parade. They offered hushed words, clasped my shoulder, and eventually left, their presence a fleeting comfort, leaving Tasha and me alone under the merciless hum of the fluorescent lights. I paced, back and forth. 10 steps to the vending machine, turn, 10 steps to the water fountain, a caged animal. My mind raced, a chaotic slideshow of Lil Q's life. His first steps, wobbly and triumphant, across our living room floor. His first word, Not Dada or Mama, but Ball, pointed with a chubby finger at the TV. The day I took the training wheels off his bike and he fell and scraped his knee, crying not from pain but from frustration, and I told him, Williamses, don't quit, get back on. I remembered holding him as a baby, this tiny perfect creature, his little hand wrapped around my finger, and feeling a love so vast it terrified me. I remembered teaching him to shoot in the alley, the countless hours of his frustration turning into a single moment of pure joy as the ball finally swished through the rusty hoop. I did it, Dad. I did it, he had yelled, his face alight. My son, my boy, my creation. How could this be happening? Finally, a doctor appeared in the doorway. He was young, his scrubs rumpled, his face etched with a weariness that went far beyond a long shift. Mr. and Mrs. Williams. I was on my feet instantly, crossing the room in 3 strides, my joints screaming. My son. How is he? Is he awake? What happened? Quentin is stable for now, the doctor began, his tone carefully neutral, a professional mask over what I could see was bad news. But his condition is critical. He experienced acute renal failure. Both of his kidneys have shut down. The words didn't make sense. They were just sounds, technical jargon that didn't apply to my son. Kidney failure? He was 17, an athlete in peak physical condition. What are you talking about? How? A hit he took? Was he dehydrated? I told him to drink water. My voice was rising, frantic. We're running tests to determine the precise cause, but it appears to be a congenital condition, an underlying genetic defect that has likely remained dormant until now. The extreme physical exertion of the game likely triggered the crisis. He took a deep breath, and I could see him steeling himself. The situation is dire. His body's being poisoned by its own waste products. He needs a kidney transplant. Immediately. The floor seemed to drop out from under me. Transplant. The word was a death sentence. The waiting list. The years of hoping. The endless dialysis. I'd cut the hair of men going through it. I'd seen what it did to them. The way it hollowed them out, tethering them to a machine. How long does he have? I whispered, the words catching in my dry throat. The doctor's eyes, full of a terrible professional pity, met mine. Without a new kidney, a few days, a week at most, a week, 7 days. The world, my world, had just been given an expiration date. Before the doctor could say another word, before my mind could even fully process the horror, a primal instinct took over. I tore at the buttons of my own shirt, the fabric ripping. Take mine, I said, my voice thick with an urgency that came from the deepest part of my soul. Right now, I'm his father. We're the same blood. We have to be a match. I know we are. Take it. Take both of them if you have to. I don't care. Just save him. The doctor put a calming hand on my arm, his touch surprisingly firm. Sir, we appreciate that. That's the best case scenario. It's the first step. But we need to test you for compatibility. Blood type, tissue markers, a full genetic workup. It's a process. Then process it, I roared, the sound echoing in the dead quiet of the waiting room. What are you waiting for? Every minute you waste, he's dying. Get the damn needles. They drew my blood, a nurse with kind eyes, and a quick, efficient needle. And then there was more waiting. I resumed my pacing, a path worn into the cheap linoleum, a track of a father's helplessness. Tasha sat frozen in her chair, staring at a motivational poster on the wall showing a mountain climber with the word perseverance underneath. The irony was a physical blow. She was distant, unreachable, locked in some private hell. I tried to comfort her, to hold her hand, but she flinched, pulling away as if my touch burned her. Her skin was cold and clammy. She was a statue of grief, and I couldn't find the chisel to break through. It was nearly dawn when the same young doctor returned. The rising sun cast long, distorted shadows down the hallway. He didn't look at me this time. He looked at the floor, at his shoes, at the wall behind me. His face was ashen. "Mr. Williams, could I speak with you in private for a moment?" A cold dread, colder and sharper than anything I had ever known, washed over me. It wasn't the dread of bad news about my son's condition. This felt different. This felt personal. This felt like a secret. "No," I said, my voice flat. "Whatever you have to say, you can say it in front of my wife." He hesitated, his eyes flicking to Tasha, then back to me. He gave a slight troubled nod. He was holding a single sheet of paper, gripping it so tightly his knuckles were white. He wouldn't meet my eyes. "Mr. Williams, we ran the compatibility tests." "And?" I demanded, my voice trembling, a sliver of desperate hope fighting against the dread. "I'm a match, right?" "I have to be." "It's okay. You can tell me." He finally looked up, and the look in his eyes was the end of my world. It wasn't just pity. It was something more. Awkwardness. Fear. "Sir, not only are you not a match, but there's no easy way to say this." He swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing. "We run a full genetic panel for these tests. It's standard procedure to ensure the highest probability of organ acceptance, according to the DNA markers. Mr. Williams, it is biologically impossible for you to be his father." The paper in his hand might as well have been a brick. The words hit me with a physical force, knocking the air from my lungs, the strength from my legs. I stumbled back, my hands slapping against the cool wall to keep myself from falling. "What? That's impossible. You made a mistake. A lab error. Run it again. Run it 10 times. Your machines are broken." "We already did," the doctor said softly, his voice full of genuine regret. "The results are conclusive. There is a 0% probability." My head was spinning. A roaring sound, like a freight train, filled my ears. Impossible. It was a lie. A hospital error. My son. My blood. I saw his face in mine every morning in the mirror. His hands were my grandfather's hands. His stride was my stride. I felt a flicker of movement beside me, a small, almost imperceptible shift. I turned my head, my neck stiff and cracking, and looked at Tasha. And that's when I knew. That's when the lie of the hospital became the truth of my life. She wasn't crying anymore. She wasn't shocked. She wasn't outraged on my behalf, ready to sue the hospital for their catastrophic mistake. She was just sitting there, her head bowed, a single fresh tear tracing a path down her cheek into the corner of her mouth. And she didn't look surprised. In her posture, in the slump of her shoulders, I saw not shock, but surrender. The surrender of someone who had been running a marathon for 17 years and had just collapsed, exhausted, at the finish line. The surrender of someone who had been caught. The doctor, a man trained to read rooms as well as charts, sensed the seismic shift in the atmosphere. He mumbled something about options, about searching the National Donor Registry, about placing Lil Q on the priority list. He quietly placed the piece of paper, the verdict, the execution order for my life, on the small table between us and backed away, leaving us to the awful, echoing silence. That silence was louder than any scream. It was filled with the deafening weight of 17 years of unspoken words, of secrets and lies. Every nervous glance Tasha had ever given me, every time she'd changed the subject from bloodlines, every moment of her strange, guilty anxiety at my pride, it all coalesced in my mind into a single, monstrous, undeniable truth. I walked over to her slowly, my legs feeling like they were wading through wet cement. I knelt in front of her, the floor cold against my bad knee. So my face was level with hers. Tasha, I said, my voice a dead, hollow thing I had never heard before. Look at me. She shook her head, her shoulders trembling. A choked sob caught in her throat. I said, look at me. I didn't shout, but the command was absolute, forged in the fires of a betrayal so profound it had burned my soul to ash. Slowly, she lifted her head. Her eyes were a swamp of guilt and terror. 17 years, I whispered, the words scraping my throat. 17 years I've loved that boy. I've worked my fingers to the bone for him. I've bragged about him to anyone who would listen. I've told the whole world he was my blood, my legacy. I pointed a shaking finger toward the ER doors, toward the room where the boy I called my son was lying. My son is dying in that room, and this piece of paper says I can't save him. Tell me why, Tasha. Tell me why it says I'm not his father. A sob tore from her throat, a raw, ugly sound of a soul breaking. Q, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Sorry? The word was acid on my tongue. Sorry isn't going to get him a kidney. I don't have time for sorry. I need a name, Tasha. Right now, who is it? It was a long time ago, she wept, her words tumbling out between gasps, a confession 17 years overdue. Before Lil Q was born, we were fighting. You remember? That bad fight about the shop. We were on a break. You said you needed space. You were gone for almost a month. I remembered. A stupid, prideful fight. I wanted to pour every dime we had and borrow more into buying the barbershop space from the old man who was retiring. She was terrified of the risk, the debt. I had called her afraid. She had called me reckless. I had packed a bag and slept on my cousin's couch for 3 weeks, too stubborn and proud to come home, to admit she might have a point. The shop that became my kingdom was born from that fight. Our son, I now realized, was born from it too. I was lonely, she cried, her face buried in her hands. I was hurt and I was stupid. It only happened one time. I swear, Q, just one night. I was going to tell you, but then we got back together and everything was so good. And then I found out I was pregnant. And I was so scared. I didn't know for sure. I just prayed. I prayed he was yours. And he looked so much like you. He acted like you. I convinced myself he was. The blood was pounding in my temples. A cold, clear rage was beginning to cut through the thick fog of pain, giving it shape and purpose. Who was it? She flinched at the tone of my voice, her eyes darting away as if the name itself would burn her. You'll hate me forever. It's a little late for that, I said, my voice flat and dangerous. The name, Tasha. Or I swear to God, I will walk out of this hospital right now, and you will never see me again. And you can explain to that boy on your own why his father abandoned him on his deathbed. The threat, as cruel as it was, hit its mark. She broke completely, her face crumpling in on itself. Marcus, she whispered, the name barely audible, a ghost of a sound. Marcus Jones. Marcus. Slick Jones. The breath I was holding escaped in a long, slow hiss. The world tilted on its axis again. Not my brother. Not a friend. My rival. The man I had despised since we were kids playing on the same cracked pavement. He grew up on the same block, breathed the same air, but he was always looking for the shortcut, the angle, the easy way out. While I was sweeping floors and learning a trade, building a business with my own 2 hands, he was running scams, stepping on people, making shady deals that always seemed to pay off. I remembered him taunting me after my knee injury in college, a smug grin on his face. Tough break, Q. Guess that's it for you. Some of us are made for bigger things. Now he was a real estate mogul, a downtown player, living in a glass tower that looked down on the very streets that made him. He drove cars that cost more than my house. He was everything I wasn't, everything I prided myself on not being. And he was the father of the boy I called my son. The irony was so cruel, so cosmically vicious, it was almost funny. I felt a laugh bubble up in my chest, a dry, humorless bark that startled us both. All those years, bragging about William's blood, about honor and hard work being coded into our DNA. And all along, Lil Q had the blood of the one man on earth I truly hated. I stood up, my joints cracking, my body moving with a strange new purpose. The pain was still there, a black hole of infinite density in my chest, but something else was growing around it. Resolve, hard and cold as forged steel. I walked to the window of the waiting room and looked out at the gray dawn breaking over the sleeping city. My son was dying. The woman I had built a life with was a stranger. My entire world was a lie. But in that moment of absolute devastation, one truth remained, burning brighter than ever before. I looked back at Tasha, a pathetic weeping figure in a cheap plastic chair. Then I looked toward the doors of the ER, where my son was fighting for his life. Biological impossibility. The doctor's words echoed in my head. A fact. A cold, hard scientific fact. But facts didn't raise a boy from a baby. Facts didn't walk the floor with him at 3 a.m. when he was colicky. Facts didn't teach him how to shoot a free throw, how to tie a tie, how to look a man in the eye, how to treat a woman with respect, how to be a man. Facts didn't sit in the stands for 17 years, bursting with a pride so fierce it felt like it could power the city. I did. He wasn't my blood, but he was my son. And I was his father, and a father protects his son, no matter the cost. I turned from the window, my face set like stone. Tasha looked up at me, her eyes red and swollen, pleading. Q, where are you going? What are you going to do? I didn't answer her. I just walked out of the waiting room, my footsteps echoing down the sterile, silent hallway. I wasn't a husband anymore. I wasn't a victim. I was a father on a mission. I had to go see a man about a kidney. I didn't go home. I went to the shop. The sun was just beginning to burn the morning haze off the street. I unlocked the door, the familiar jingle of the bells sounding alien and strange. The air was still, thick with the ghosts of yesterday's laughter. I sat in my throne, the big leather chair, and I looked at the wall of Q Jr., the clippings, the photos, the proud headlines, a shrine to a lie. But the boy in the pictures, the boy flying through the air, he was real. His fight was real. My love for him was real. My rage had cooled, solidified into something more useful, a plan. I wasn't a street fighter anymore, but I knew the city's pressure points. The barbershop wasn't just a place for haircuts. It was a confessional, an information exchange, a hub. For 20 years, I'd been listening to cops lamenting their bosses, to lawyers complaining about their cases, to contractors bitching about crooked inspectors, to city workers who knew where all the bodies were buried. You learn things. You hear whispers. And I had a long memory. I looked at my reflection in the dark mirror. The man looking back wasn't a barber anymore. His eyes were cold. He was ready for war. I pulled out my phone. My first call wasn't to a lawyer. It was to Mr. Henderson, the old man whose hair I'd been cutting for 15 years. Before he retired, he'd been a records clerk at City Hall for 4 decades. Henderson, it's Q. Wake up. I need to ask you something. You remember that West Side redevelopment deal from back in '05? The one that pushed all those families out? I need to know who the city inspector was on that condemnation. And I need to know who signed the final purchase order. I could hear him shuffling papers on his end. Give me 10 minutes, son. That deal always smelled rotten. My next call was to Dre, the kid who was always hanging around. He was a good kid, but he knew people, people who lived in the city's shadows. Dre, it's Q. I need a favor. You remember those construction guys who got stiffed on the Jones Tower project a few years back? The ones who were complaining about the cheap concrete? I need to find two of them, the loudest ones. Tell them Q wants to talk and that it'll be worth their time. I need signed statements. Dre didn't ask questions. Consider it done, Q. Anything for Lil Q. My last call was the hardest. It was to a private investigator, a former cop named Frank Rizzo, who owed me for keeping my mouth shut about his gambling problem a few years back when his bookie came looking for him. Frank, it's Quentin Williams. I need you to do something for me, and I need it done in the next hour. I need everything you can find on Marcus Jones's wife, Caroline. Her father's a judge, right? Find me something. Anything. Frank grunted. Leverage. I get it. It'll cost you. Just find it, I said, and hung up. For an hour, I sat in the dark of my shop, the phone buzzing with replies. Henderson came through with a name and a document number, faxed from an old machine he kept in his basement. Dre found the construction workers, who were more than happy to sign an affidavit for a price. And Frank, the PI, hit the jackpot. He sent me a grainy photo. It was Marcus, coming out of a hotel, his arm around a woman who was definitely not his wife. The timestamp was from 3 weeks ago. I put all of it, the document copies, the signed statements, the damning photograph, into a thick manila envelope. I had my weapon. Now it was time to go to war. The lobby of the Jones Tower was designed to make you feel small. It was a cold cathedral of glass, chrome, and polished black marble, silent except for the hushed clicks of expensive shoes and the whisper of the ventilation system. The air smelled of money and arrogance. I walked up to the receptionist, a woman with a face so frozen with Botox she looked bored by the apocalypse. I was still in the clothes I'd worn to the game, now rumpled and smelling of hospital antiseptic and stale fear. I knew I looked like I didn't belong, and that was the point. I'm here to see Marcus Jones. My voice was calm, but my reflection in the polished black wall showed a man I barely recognized. My eyes were hollowed out, my face a mask of grim purpose. Do you have an appointment? She asked, her voice clipped, not looking up from her computer screen. No, I said, but he'll see me. Tell him Quentin Williams is here. Tell him it's about his son. That got her attention. Her perfectly plucked eyebrows rose a fraction of a millimeter. She looked me up and down, a flicker of something, curiosity, alarm, in her plastic eyes. She picked up her phone, murmured into it, and a moment later, her eyes widened. He'll see you. 48th floor. The elevator ride was a silent, swift descent into the heavens of my enemy. The doors opened directly into a sprawling office that was bigger than my entire barbershop and apartment combined. One wall was a floor-to-ceiling window with a panoramic view of the city, my city, now laid out like a map at my feet. Marcus Jones was standing behind a massive desk made of some dark, exotic wood that looked like it had been stolen from a rainforest. He was wearing a tailored suit that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage. Money had made him soft. His face was puffy, his middle thick, his eyes small and shrewd. Quentin, he said, his voice a smooth, condescending purr. He hadn't lost that. To what do I owe the pleasure? It's been a long time. I heard about your boy. Tough break. Kid's a hell of a player. Saw him on the news. He gestured to a low-slung leather chair that probably cost more than my car. I ignored it. I walked to the center of the room, feeling the plush carpet sink under my worn-out sneakers, a deliberate intrusion of the street into his sterile sky palace. We need to talk, I said. I'm a busy man, Q, he replied, glancing at a gold watch on his wrist. So let's get to it. You need money? Is that it? For the hospital bills? I can help with that. A little something for old time's sake, for the old neighborhood. He was already reaching for a checkbook, trying to dismiss me, to buy me off like some panhandler, to put me back in my place. The rage I had been carefully packing down inside me flared hot and bright. I don't want your damn money, Marcus. I walked right up to his desk and leaned over it, putting my hands flat on the polished wood. I was close enough to see the tiny broken blood vessels in his nose, to smell the expensive cloying cologne he wore. 17 years ago, I said, my voice low and even, each word a carefully placed stone. Tasha, that week I was gone, you remember? A flicker of panic in his eyes. He was good, but not that good. He tried to hide it, leaning back in his chair, affecting a look of bored confusion. Ancient history, Q. We were kids. People make mistakes. Some mistakes have consequences that last a lifetime, I said. My son, Quentin Jr., is lying in a bed at University Hospital. His kidneys have failed. He needs a transplant, or he's dead in a week. I let that hang in the air, the silence in the opulent office suddenly suffocating. He's got a congenital kidney disease, a bad gene passed down from his biological father. He got the bad kidneys from you, Marcus. That weak blood of yours. He went white. The color drained from his puffy face. What the hell are you talking about? That's insane. You're crazy. Am I? I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out the thick manila envelope. I tossed it onto his desk. It landed with a heavy, satisfying thud. I spent the morning making some calls, Marcus, talking to some ghosts from your past, people you stepped on to get up here to the 48th floor. He stared at the envelope as if it were a live cobra. That, I said, my voice like ice, is a file. Let's start with the West Side redevelopment deal. I've got the name of the city inspector you bribed to condemn a block of perfectly good houses so you could buy the land for pennies on the dollar. Old man Hemlock lived in one of those houses. He had a heart attack a week after he got his eviction notice. His daughter, Sheila. She works the register at the corner store near my shop. She remembers the inspector's name. And a funny thing is, that same inspector's kid just got a full-ride scholarship to a private university, paid for by a charitable fund that traces right back to a shell corporation you own. Marcus's face was slick with sweat. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. But that's not all, I continued, tapping the envelope. I've also got sworn, notarized affidavits from two of the construction foremen on this very building. The ones you paid in cash, off the books, to use substandard materials on the foundation supports below the 10th floor. They're willing to talk to the district attorney for a price I'm willing to pay. I leaned in closer, my voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. And then there's the personal stuff. This one's my favorite. I pulled the grainy photo from the envelope and slid it across the desk. That's you, isn't it? At the Four Seasons, 3 weeks ago. And that's not Caroline, your wife. What's her name? The blonde? Your assistant's assistant? I hear her father, the federal judge, is a big believer in family values. I wonder what he'd think of this. I wonder if he'd start looking into your business dealings with a little more scrutiny. I leaned in so close our faces were inches apart. You see, you built this glass tower on a foundation of lies and broken people, and I'm about to kick it out from under you. Unless... He looked at me, his eyes wide with the pure primal terror of a cornered rat. The arrogant mogul was gone, replaced by a scared, soft man in an expensive suit. Unless what? He croaked. You're going to come with me to the hospital. Right now, you're going to walk in there, and you're going to volunteer to be tested as a kidney donor. And if you're a match, and I pray to the only God I have left that you are going to give my son your kidney. You're going to lie on that table, and you're going to let them cut a piece of you out to save the boy you helped create and then abandoned for 17 years. And you're going to do it with a smile on your face. You're going to be the hero, the long-lost family friend who stepped up to save the day. "You're insane," he stammered, shaking his head. "You can't make me. That's extortion." "Call it whatever you want," I cut him off, straightening up. "I call it a father saving his son. I'm not making you do anything, Marcus. I'm giving you a choice, a simple choice. Option A, you save your own skin. You give up a kidney. You go on with your life. You'll have a scar, and you'll have saved a life. Maybe it'll even be good for your soul if you still have one. Option B, you say no, and I walk out of this office and make one phone call to a reporter I know at the Tribune. By the time the 6 o'clock news comes on, the whole city will know what kind of man Marcus Slick Jones really is. Your wife will leave you. Her father will crucify you. And every person you ever screwed over will line up to piss on the ashes of your empire. The choice is yours. But while you're thinking it over, just remember that every second you waste is a second my son gets closer to dying." I turned my back on him and walked toward the door. I didn't have to look back. I could feel his fear radiating across the room, a palpable, suffocating force. I was halfway to the elevator when I heard his strangled voice. "Wait." I stopped, my hand on the call button, but I didn't turn around. "I'll do it," he said, his voice small and defeated, the sound of a king being dethroned. "I'll go to the hospital." The surgery was scheduled for the next day. The test had come back, a perfect match. Of course, the universe had a sick, twisted sense of humor. I spent the night in the uncomfortable vinyl chair next to Lil Q's bed, watching the rhythmic rise and fall of his chest, listening to the steady, reassuring beep of the machines that were keeping him alive. He was pale and still, a shadow of the vibrant, soaring boy who had owned the basketball court. But he was alive. I held his hand, the long, powerful fingers so much like my own, and I didn't care what any DNA test said. This was my son. My history with him was written in memories, not in genetic code. Tasha tried to talk to me. She hovered in the doorway, her face swollen and blotchy from crying. "Q, please," she'd whisper. "Can we just talk?" I'd just shake my head and turn back to our son. There were no words left between us. Her betrayal wasn't a wound that could be stitched up with apologies. It was a rot that had consumed the entire foundation of our life together, leaving nothing but a hollowed-out shell. The next morning, they wheeled Lil Q away toward the operating room. He gave my hand a weak squeeze. "See you later, Pop." "See you later, champ," I whispered back, my voice thick. A few minutes later, I saw them take Marcus down the same hall. He was in a flimsy hospital gown, his face a mask of pasty terror. He looked small and pathetic. He wouldn't meet my eyes. I felt no pity for him. I felt nothing at all. He wasn't a person to me in that moment. He was a means to an end, a spare part. The wait during the surgery was the longest 8 hours of my life. I sat in the hospital cafeteria, a place buzzing with the mundane dramas of life and death, nursing a cup of coffee that had long gone cold. And in the middle of it all, Tasha found me. She sat down opposite me, her hands twisting a paper napkin into shreds. "Is there any news?" she asked softly. "No," I said, my eyes fixed on the condensation dripping down a water pitcher on a nearby table. "Q, we need to talk about us after this is over." I finally raised my head and looked at her, really looked at her, the woman I thought I knew better than I knew myself, the face I had woken up next to for 20 years. It was like looking at a stranger I'd passed on the street. The familiarity was gone, erased. "There is no us, Tasha," I said, my voice devoid of heat, devoid of anything. It was just a statement of fact, as simple and final as a weather report. I reached into the inner pocket of my jacket, the same one I'd been wearing for what felt like a lifetime. I pulled out another envelope. This one was long and white, with the name of a law firm printed in the corner. I slid it across the sticky table. It stopped right in front of her shredded napkin. She stared at it, her brow furrowed in confusion. "What is this?" "Divorce papers," I said. "My lawyer drew them up this morning. I signed them before I came here. Everything is split 50-50. The house, the savings, the business. It's fair. All you have to do is sign your name." Her face crumpled, the hope draining out of it like water from a sieve. "No. Q, no, please. Don't do this. It was a mistake. One mistake in 20 years. Don't throw everything away. I love you. I love our family." "Our family?" I let out that same dry, humorless laugh from Marcus's office. It was becoming a familiar sound. "Our family was built on a lie you told every single day for 17 years. Every time I held that boy, every time I bragged about his Williams blood, you were lying to my face. You watched me love him, thinking he was a piece of me, and you said nothing. That's not a mistake, Tasha. A mistake is something you do once and regret. This was a choice. You made it every morning you woke up next to me." "I was scared," she cried, her voice rising, drawing looks from the tables around us. "I was a kid. I didn't want to lose you." "You should have thought of that before you let Marcus Jones into our bed," I said, my voice dropping again, cold and sharp. "You didn't just lie to me. You lied to him." I jerked my head in the direction of the surgical wing. "You let that boy grow up believing a lie. You took his truth from him, his identity. For what? So you could feel safe? So you wouldn't have to face the consequences." I stood up, the chair scraping harshly against the linoleum. "I will provide for you. You won't be out on the street. You were a good mother to him. I won't take that away. But you will not be my wife. You will not be in my house. The life we had is over." Just then, the young doctor from the first night hurried into the cafeteria, his face tired but his eyes bright. He was scanning the room. He saw me and broke into a relieved smile. "Mr. Williams, I was just coming to find you. The surgery was a complete success. The kidney is in, and it's functioning perfectly. Your son, he's going to be okay. He's in recovery. He's going to make a full recovery." Relief, pure and absolute, washed over me so powerfully my knees almost buckled. He was okay. My boy was going to live. The tears I had refused to shed for myself, for my broken marriage, for my shattered life, now streamed freely down my face. Through the blur, I saw Tasha, her face a mask of profound relief for her son and utter despair for herself as she watched me. A few hours later, they let me see him. He was in a private room, awake, groggy and pale, but his eyes were clear. The gray, deathly pallor was gone, replaced by the faint flush of life. "Hey, Pop," he mumbled, his voice hoarse and weak. "Hey, champ," I said, my voice thick with unshed emotion. I sat down in the chair beside him and took his hand. It felt warm. "How you feeling?" "Like I got hit by a truck that backed up and hit me again," he rasped, a faint smile touching his lips. "But better. I feel cleaner inside." He looked at me, his eyes full of questions he was just now strong enough to ask. They said you couldn't, that your kidney wasn't a match." I took a deep breath. This was it. The final, most painful truth. The last piece of the old world to be torn down before we could build a new one. "Lil Q," I started, my heart aching with the pain I was about to cause him. "There's something I have to tell you. It's not going to be easy to hear, but you're a man now, and you deserve the truth, the whole truth." I told him everything, about the DNA test, about the fight with his mother 17 years ago, about Marcus Jones. I didn't sugarcoat it, but I didn't fill it with my own rage either. I just laid out the facts, cold and hard. I watched his face as the reality of my words settled in. I saw the confusion morph into disbelief, then hurt, then a flash of anger. His world, like mine, was shattering. When I finished, he was silent for a long time, just staring at the acoustic tile ceiling. A single tear escaped the corner of his eye and traced a slow path back toward his ear. Finally, he turned his head on the pillow and looked at me. His gaze was steady, searching. So that man, Marcus Jones, he's my biological father? Yeah, I said softly. He is. And he's the one who gave me the kidney? Yeah, he is. He was quiet for another long moment, processing it all. Does this mean I'm like him? He asked, his voice small, full of a new and terrible fear. No, I said, my voice firm. Don't you ever think that. You're like me, because I raised you. He just provided a starting point. We decide who we become. He made his choices. You'll make yours. You're a Williams. Then he squeezed my hand, his grip surprisingly strong. So he gave me a kidney, he said, his voice quiet but firm. You gave me my life. My breath hitched in my throat. The dam broke. You were at every game, Pop, he said, his voice gaining a little strength, a little of his old fire. You taught me how to shave. You taught me how to drive. You taught me that a man's word is his bond, and that you look another man in the eye when you shake his hand. You stayed up with me when I was sick. You yelled at me when I was stupid. You were there. He wasn't. Blood ain't the only thing that makes a family. You've been my father every single day for 17 years. Nothing and nobody can ever change that. I leaned forward and rested my forehead against his, the tears flowing again. But this time, they were not tears of pain or rage. They were tears of love, pure and absolute, a love that had been tested by lies and fire and had come out stronger. I ain't your biological pop, I whispered, my voice breaking. But I'm your dad. I'll always be your dad. I pulled back and looked him in the eye, man to man. But her, I said, my voice hardening as I thought of Tasha, still waiting outside, hoping for a reconciliation that would never come. She belongs to the streets. I stayed with him until he drifted off to sleep, his breathing deep and even, the beep of the monitor a steady rhythm of hope. I kissed his forehead. Then I stood up. I looked at my son, saved and sleeping, the future stretched out before him again. I had lost a wife, a marriage, and the illusion I had lived with for nearly 2 decades. But I hadn't lost my son. In the wreckage of it all, I had found the only thing that ever truly mattered. I walked out of that hospital room, leaving the past behind me. I didn't look for Tasha. I didn't look back. I walked through the automatic doors and out into the cool night air. A free man. A father. The city lights glittered, the same as they had every other night. But I was a different man looking at them. I had a shop to open in the morning. My kingdom was waiting. Life went on. The hum of the clippers was waiting.